On episode 191 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, I share some of my favorite resistance training tips. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/191. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hello, I'm really glad to have you here today with me here on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. Without you, there really wouldn't be a podcast. So again, really glad that you take the time to come out here each day and listen to the show. Today I'm going to get into some of my favorite weight training tips. But before we get there, I just wanted to ask you how you're doing on your health and fitness journey. If there's anything I can do to help you, I really do wish you would reach out. If you'll go to our Facebook group at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group, join the group and please do reach out there. Let me know what's going on in your life. If there's anything that I can help you with, I'd be more than happy to either cover it on a podcast episode or maybe build something, or if nothing else, at least answer your questions if you have any. So please go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group and join us there today and be a part of that group. I really do appreciate the folks there, and I know you will too. So weight training, that's kind of my favorite thing to talk about. I don't talk about it a lot on the podcast here because I know that's not everybody's thing, but really it probably should be. And the main reason that I say that is as we age, unfortunately, our bodies will naturally start to lose muscle mass. It's a concept called sarcopenia. And basically from age 35 on, we're going to lose about 1% of our body mass in muscle if we don't do something to correct that, if we don't do something to prevent that. So a sedentary individual who's not lifting weights is going to lose muscle mass. They just are. It's how our bodies were designed. If we're not using it, you're going to lose it. I know you've heard that before, but with muscle, that's a complete truism. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So I do think you need to be doing some resistance training. And while today I want to call it weight training, just realize that it doesn't have to be weights. It can, in fact, be body weight, and you can do other things to add resistance that is not necessarily iron, is not necessarily the metal weights that you see. But I do think there's benefits for just about everybody to start working toward getting into a weightlifting program, because the more weight, the more mass you're able to put on now while you're younger, the better off you're going to be when you get older. And with body weight, there is some kind of physical limit into what you can and can't do with building mass. I mean, I've seen some pretty massive people. I mean, you see that, you look at gymnasts and you can say, okay, well, most gymnasts are pretty buff. They're pretty muscular people. The women have really good, strong, muscular legs. You can see that. The men have muscular bodies, just really, really ripped. Now, they do a lot of intense, really intense body weight movements. But if you look at a bodybuilder, obviously you can see that there's an opportunity there to add even additional mass on top of what a gymnast can. Now, I only say it, I don't think you're going to be a gymnast. I don't think you're going to be a bodybuilder, although you may. I know I'm not going to be. But as we kind of go forward, it's that thing of thinking, let's add some mass. And the best way to do that is to add resistance. And so today I want to share some of my favorite weightlifting tips. The first one, and this is probably one of the critical ones early on, is before every workout, make sure you've warmed up. You don't want to roll out of bed or just get out of a chair and just start lifting weights. Make sure that you've gotten the muscles generally warm by moving them through the full range of motion before you start lifting weights. A cold muscle is kind of like a cold rubber band. And I know you've done this. If you've seen a rubber band out on a freezing day, you take that rubber band, it just snaps. You don't want that to happen to your muscle. So make sure that you're giving your muscle that opportunity to start warming up. Take a good 5-10 minutes, some good full body. If you're doing legs that day and that's all you're doing, then it's possible that you can just go walk on a treadmill or do an elliptical for a little while, and then that'll warm up your legs. But if you're going to be doing upper body, you want to do some things to warm up your upper body. So, doing some jumping jacks, swinging your arms around a little bit, just getting a good full movement of the whole body is going to get the blood flowing to those muscles and warm them up. So you should almost have kind of started to put on a little bit of a sweat before you start to lift. That's how you know you're basically warm, is when you start getting that little sweat sheen. I guess for women you'd say glistening But generally, once you start glistening, now you know you're warm enough to start lifting weights. So the second one is that you need to address mobility. Now, I've talked about mobility on the show quite a bit, and the reason is it's a very important fitness modality for us as we get older. We do a lot of sitting. We don't move around as much as we need to. As a result, our hips tend to be tight. If you've been walking on heels, you may find that your calves are very tight, and if you've injured yourself, like your ankle or your knee, you might find that you have some scar tissue, some mobility issues there. So do some work over time to improve your mobility, and that'll help you stay safer and more injury-free when you're lifting. Because if you have a mobility issue and you're trying to lift weights around the mobility issue, you're actually risking bigger injury because you're doing that. So you need to make sure, one, you've got good mobility. That's going to allow you to do something I'll talk about in a minute about keeping good form. But if you don't have good mobility, it's very, very difficult to maintain good form. So start with mobility. Next is have a plan. I see a lot of people will walk in the gym and they just sort of start walking around going from machine to machine without really any design to what they're doing. It just doesn't appear that they have a design. And the problem is, if you don't have a plan, if you don't know what ladder you're supposed to be climbing, it's great that you're climbing a ladder, but you're not necessarily going to get to the point you want to get if you don't have a plan. So when you go into the gym, understand what that day's for. If this is a full body workout, then great. You know the exercises you're going to do, you know the weights that you're going to do, you know your rest periods, you have all of that planned out and ready, and then you can go just execute to that plan. That's the best way to approach it. The ad hoc, I feel like I'll go do a couple curls, or my shoulders are looking a little small, so I'll do some overhead presses, not really going to give you the benefits of having a plan and sticking to it over the course of the long haul. Number 4, have good form. This is extremely important. If you're not using good form and you start adding weight, you will get injured. It's just a statement of fact. You cannot do the movements in bad form over the long haul and not expect some form of injury, because the weight is going to put additional stresses on your joints, going to put additional stresses on ligaments and tendons, and those were not built to have that. If you haven't trained them properly, if you're not using good form, you're very likely to hurt yourself. So making sure that you use good form as you go through the exercise is very, very important. And that good form means, one, that you understand the form of that exercise. So make sure you study that form. Number 2, you're executing that form properly. So it's very hard sometimes for you to see your own form. Some gyms have mirrors, which help a little bit, but not entirely. The best way to do it, if you're new to it or you're just trying to figure out the exercise, is to have someone else, perhaps even a trainer, watch you do the exercise. A lot of times you can go into the big box gyms. Maybe the trainer's not training you, but if you go over and say, hey, I'm going to go do some squats, could you watch my form for one set? Most of the trainers in the gym will be willing to do that. The one set, walk over. It's kind of like asking someone to spot you on the bench press. They get it. They don't want you to injure yourself. So if you go over and say, hey, can you show me, make sure I'm using good form on this squat, most of the trainers in your gym are going to do that for you for free. If you're going to need more input than that, just take the time to hire a trainer. It's worth it. It's worth it to learn the form so you don't injure yourself, because an injury is just going to put you out for far longer than you need to, and you're not getting any benefit while you're injured. Okay, number 5 is safety first. So I talked about bench presses. I talked about squats. Those are 2 exercises where you have a weight effectively over your body, and that puts you in a situation where you could injure yourself if you drop those weights. So anytime I'm going to do a bench press, anytime I'm going to do a squat, I'm always in a safety rack, or I have a spotter. I prefer the safety rack over a spotter only because I know with the safety rack that I'm not bothering anybody else, and I know that I'm safe under the safety rack because I can just bring the weights down to the safety rack bottom, and then I can just move on about my business. But if you're going to be doing the work, make sure you're practicing good safety with that. So that means when you have the bar up there, you're going to go ahead and you're going to put those collars on there. You're going to make sure that the collars are on there sound and square, that they're not going to slide off. The weights are evenly distributed across there. You're in an even distribution under the bar so that you're not unweighted too heavily on one side versus the other side. You've got a good grip on that bar. And if that means that you need to use some form of strap or glove, then do it. I mean, it's better to be safe than sorry. And then again, just make sure that you're using the equipment properly. If you don't know how, ask a trainer. If you don't believe that you have the right form or you're not doing something safely, ask a trainer. Okay. Number 6, I want to talk a little bit about the types of movements that you can do. There are compound movements and there are isolation movements. Now, a compound movement is any movement that's going to move multiple muscles. So this would include the squat, where you're using your legs, your hips, your buttocks, your core, abdomen. So you're using a good portion of your body. Another one will be the deadlift, where you're bringing the bar from the floor. And there you're using your glutes, your hamstrings. You're also going to be using your hips a little, your abs, your back, and your arms to some extent. So, these are compound movements that are using multiple muscles through a general range of motion. And compound movements are my favorite because you're getting a lot of work done. You're typically moving a good bit of weight. And these are more what I would call functional type movements. You're much more likely to squat or do a deadlift to pick something heavy up off the floor than you are to do an isolation movement where you're just curling your arms. So let's get into some isolation movements. Isolation movements are where you're only using one muscle. So if you can imagine just doing the bicep curl, where you're bringing your fist up into a curl position, up into a position, making the bicep muscle contract, and your fist is now close to your shoulder, if not touching your shoulder when you finish that movement. That's an isolation movement because it's only working the bicep. Now, there's some value to isolation movements when we're really trying to put on mass on a particular muscle. But for most of us, particularly starting out, you want to focus on the compound movements because you're going to, 1, get more bang for the buck, and 2, you don't want to build muscular imbalances. And if you're doing isolation movements, it's very easy to get imbalanced really quickly. It's very hard to get imbalanced if you're doing compound movements because just doing deadlifts, doing squats, doing bench press and pull-ups, and maybe an overhead press, just those 5 exercises gives you a good full body workout. And then at that point, as you start progressing to intermediate, if you notice some of your muscle groups are just not coming out the way others are, so maybe you've noticed that your quads are coming out really good, but your buttocks are not doing what you want them to do. Maybe we move in and do a couple isolation movements that are just for the buttocks, and that will help bring them out. But until you get to the intermediate and advanced level, the isolation movements are less valuable to you, and you should focus on the compound movements. Okay, number 7 is consistency. If you're not going to go consistently, you're not going to see progress. And the reason is that your muscles build actually when you're resting. And that's a very true statement. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so you challenge the muscle with a stimulus, and then you let it rest and you feed it. And then you come back and you do it again. And each time you do that, the muscle's then going to want to build to be stronger and or bigger. So that's the cycle. But if that rest cycle goes too long, which is pretty much probably anything more than 72 hours for most muscles, then the muscle itself is going to build up, but then it's going to start to slowly go through sarcopenia. It's going to slowly degrade because it's going to say, hey, we're not using these muscles the way we thought. We thought we were going to be using them because they were doing these workouts, and then now they aren't doing the workouts. And so you come back again, suddenly you're facing another series of DOMs. You don't feel as strong as you did the last workout. That's why. So you need to make sure that you have a consistent pattern. It's okay to do a deload week every once in a while, take a week off, that's fine. But just realize that it's going to be the consistency over a number of years that's going to give you the body you want. You're not going to get this in 20 days. You're not going to get this in a week. You're going to have to make sure that this is a consistent thing that you're going to be able to add to your life so that you're slowly building or maintaining muscle over time. And that's where you're going to see the benefits. It's in the consistency. Number 8 is periodization. And periodization is a term most bodybuilders are very familiar with, but a lot of other people might not be so familiar with. Periodization is where you basically decide for a period of time I'm going to do one workout, and then I'm going to change my workout for another period. So what this does, it does a couple things. One, it causes your muscles to be worked in different ways over each of these periods. So maybe I do a 8-week periodization where for 8 weeks I'm going to focus on strength. So I'm going to go low rep, high weight. And I do my compound movements, my 5 compound movements that way. And then I say after that 8 weeks, now I'm going to shift it up. And I'm now going to lower the weight, increase the reps, so I'm focused more on mass. And maybe I go ahead, because I've lowered the weight and increased the reps, maybe I have a little bit more energy. So maybe, and because I'm taking a shorter rest period during this mass building period than I did during the strength building period, I have a little bit more time. So I'm going to throw in a couple of isolation movements for certain muscle parts that I really want to build up during this 8-week period. So now I have an entirely different program that I'm going to run for the next 8-week period. So that's periodization. So periodization is something that if you get into this and you start noticing that you hit plateaus pretty regularly, you might want to start periodizing your workouts in either 4 or 8-week segments. I've heard people doing as little as 3 just to keep it interesting. And that's another thing that periodization does, is it keeps the workout very, very interesting. So periodization is a great tool over the long haul to make sure that you keep getting the benefits from the work that you do. Number 9 is nutrition and supplements. As you know, I'm a big proponent of food, whole food. There's nothing that your body can't get from the food that you eat if you eat a normal diet. If you eat meat and vegetables, if you eat whole foods, things that you recognize as living things, you can get every bit of nutrition that you'll ever need to build a good body. You can get plenty of protein. In fact, your body doesn't need a ton of protein to build muscle, but it needs more than it would if it's not building muscle. But you can get all of the nutrients you need from real food. Now, I get a lot of questions about supplements because everybody wants the magic pill, and there really isn't a magic pill. You have to be doing the work to get the result. And if you're not getting the result, it's because you're not doing the work. It's typically not the food. It's the supplement's not going to save you. There are some supplements that bodybuilders use that generally are effective in helping them build strength, build muscle, have a little bit more endurance and this and that. But it's like a 1% to 2% improvement. And if you think of, let's look at it as a grade. Okay, let's say right now you're a D student and you want to be an A student. So you look at the bodybuilder that's an A student. An A student says, ooh, if I take creatine, I get a 2% increase in my grade. So I get to go from a 90 to a 92. And they're like, that's great. That means the world to me to go from a 90 to a 92. And here you are down with your 64 grade, and you're like, ooh, I can get a 2% increase if I take creatine. That's going to put me from 64 to 65. And so what? I mean, that's not going to be a game changer for you. That's not going to mean the world to you. It's not going to be something that people can see so much unless you're progressing up the grades. And then now you can consider, once you get up into that higher bracket, what are the things I can tweak when I'm there? But don't look to supplements as a way to build anything that you're not willing to build yourself. So just use good whole foods, eat well, and you're going to be fine. Number 10 is rest. Now, I explained earlier that we go through a period of challenge. So we do the workout, and that's a stimulus to the muscle. It breaks it down. And now we've got to go through a period of rest. Rest is very important. Now, there are 2 types of rest that you need to focus on. The first is the time period between workouts. And that's a very important time period for your body to recover and do the things it needs to do so you'll be ready for the next workout. But there's another part of rest called sleep. If you're not sleeping well, you're not going to see the muscular gains and strength gains that you might want as much as you want. You're going to probably see some because people, generally can do a lot of damage to themselves. They can avoid a lot of things. They can not get the sleep and, not necessarily eat well all the time. And sometimes you can get away with that. Now, as you're getting older, that's going to be less and less that you're going to have that benefit. So focusing on getting good sleep, that's where the hormone cycles start really kicking in. That's going to make sure that you have the right hormone mix. So when you go into the gym, your body is functioning properly, and it's going to allow you to build the muscle. It's going to allow you to have the energy you need. All the things you need to happen for you to have progress are going to be there if you're getting adequate sleep and you're resting between each of these hard work sessions. And then number 11 is patience. I talked about the 64 and the 90. You're not going to become this A student in a couple of weeks. It's going to take months, if not years, of training. Most bodybuilders that you see, most people that are really, really ripped and fit, they didn't start 2 months ago. They didn't. And while you may see these before and after pictures where people are going from just this normal looking person to now this huge, wonderful ripped person, they're telling you they did that in 60 days. And one, I can tell you, okay, well, that guy's 21 years old, so he has all the genetics in the world for that to happen, and we don't. 2, you can't necessarily tell that claim is completely true. That might be 1 year in 60 days. It might be that it took this guy 3 years to get to that point, or and in many cases, this has been the case, is the person in the before picture isn't even the same person as the picture in the after picture. So take that with a grain of salt when you see those images. If a friend of yours comes up and says, okay, I gained this amount of muscle in this amount of days doing this program, you trust your friend, then okay, great, go give that one a shot. But the reality of all this is you need to be in this for the long game. This is a longevity play. We want to be around, we want to be fit, we want to be independent, and we want to look good and feel good for the rest of our lives. And to do that, we need to maintain our muscle mass. So have the patience to make this a part of your lifestyle, to make this a regular thing. So I'm going to do a quick recap. So the 11 best weightlifting tips that I have is, number 1, make sure you're warm. Warm up before you start. Number 2, make sure you're addressing mobility in addition to your weight training and resistance training, because mobility is what's going to help keep you safe and keep you from getting injured. Number 2, have a plan. Don't go at this ad hoc. Don't just start getting on equipment and trying it out. Have a plan of what you're trying to accomplish, have a goal, and then have the plan that's going to get you there. Number 4, use good form. Good form is kind of the bedrock foundation for all good weightlifting. If you don't have good form, you will get injured. It's just a matter of time. So make sure you're practicing good form. And if you don't know the form of an exercise, learn it. Get someone to teach it to you. Watch some YouTube videos if you need to. Ask me, ask a trainer. Just make sure that you're using good form. Number 5, safety first. You are using weights. You are, in many cases, putting those weights over your body. You can drop those weights on you, smash a toe, smash a finger, smash face, break a neck. All of those things happen in the gym when people are not careful. So make sure that you're following good safety protocols with everything that you do. Number 6 is understand what compound movements and isolation movements are. Again, that goes back to having a plan. You know why you're doing the exercises you're doing, you know what they're there to accomplish, and you're focused on building those muscles, building strength in those muscles that you're working through those compound or isolation movements. Number 7 is consistency. You have to keep coming. You have to keep going. If you're not going, you're not going to get the results. You just won't. You're taking too much time off between each exercise set. You're just not going to see the results of that work. Number 8 is periodization. If you start having plateaus, periodization is a good tool to allow you to continue. They used to throw out the term muscle confusion. That's kind of a silly statement. Your muscles don't get confused. They just adapt to what you're doing. So if you're doing something different, they're going to start adapting because they have to. So that's really all it is just changing the adaptation stimulus as you do the work. So an 8-week period of time is plenty of time for your body to adapt to a set of work. And then you can think about whether you want to change up that periodization and do something different for another period of time. Plus, it just adds a little bit of variety to your workouts if you happen to be someone who would get very bored doing the same workout week after week with just higher weights. Number 9 is nutrition and supplements. Big fan of whole foods. Not such a fan of supplements because most of them don't really do anything for you. The few that have been shown to do something clinically really don't show enough benefit for me to say it's worth your money. There are some benefits to creatine beyond just the weightlifting thing. It's the reason that I take it from time to time, but just recognize that it's not the placebo, it's not the magic pill that's going to take you from where you are now to being some buff bodybuilder. That's not how it works. The pills just won't do that for you today or ever. You've got to do the work. You've got to eat good food. So make sure you're eating good whole foods. And then number 10 is rest. Make sure you're getting plenty of rest between sets so that you can do the next set. So if I'm going to be doing strength work, I know that I need a longer, because the heavy weight that I'm going to be doing, I need a longer rest period between each set. And then if I'm doing muscle building, mass building, then I know that I'm doing lighter weights for more reps. I take a shorter rest. I know between each of the workouts, I know that I need about 48 to 72 hours. That's me personally. You may need more. You may be able to get away with less, but generally 48 to 72 is a good mix. For some muscle groups in the past, I've needed as much as a week. But understanding that you need that rest to allow the muscle to rebuild is very, very important. And then making sure that you're getting good sleep, because during sleep, we are setting our hormone cycles. And if we set a good hormone cycle, then that's going to help us have everything we need to perform in the gym and get the results that we want. And then finally is patience. This is a long game, so keep at it as if it were a long game. You're not going to get there tomorrow. You're not going to get there in 2 months. You're going to have a long-term path to where you want to be. And every time you go in the gym, you've got a plan. Every time you go and you keep going consistently, that's all a part of that patience formula of just go, 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 go. I'm going to keep doing this for myself. I'm going to keep getting results. And then if I have to change it up, I do the periodization, change up my program, and I keep charging on. But I have the patience to stick with it for as long as I need to, and knowing that this is now a part of my lifestyle. Probably be lifting weights until the day I die. If you took something valuable from today's episode, I'd really appreciate if you would share it with friends and family. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, I share some of my favorite cardio training tips. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.